Denver is a cow town. Let's face it, since 1865, a lot of our livelihood has come through agriculture, through stock raising.
The stock show really does embody the history of the West because it has water, the railroad, livestock.
The first official stock show was in 1906.
That really kicked off what has become one of the greatest shows on earth.
National Western Stock Show is the top combination stock show, rodeo, and horse show in the world. It is known as the Super Bowl of cattle shows.
There are over 100 years of agriculture, competition, commerce, all woven together at this historic place.
It is an expression of our Western heritage in all its various and multiple and manifold dimensions.
It truly is a place to be. It's the place to be.
This program was funded by the History Colorado State Historical Fund,
supporting projects throughout the state to preserve, protect, and interpret Colorado's architectural and archaeological treasures. History Colorado State Historical Fund. Create the future, honor the past.
with support from the Denver Public Library and History Colorado, with additional funding and support from these fine organizations. And viewers like you, thank you.
This is a livestock show. There are so many animals that are here.
Cattle.
Cows, heifers, bulls, calves.
Horses, 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 horses.
Goats, pigs, bison, yaks.
More varieties of chickens than I can even begin to count.
Ducks and geese and guineas and turkeys.
Dogs, burros, mules.
Horses, horses, horses.
Sheep, bunnies,
Llamas, alpacas, all kinds of critters.
Then they have ponies. And oh, by the way, they have mini horses too.
You could pretty much come and find any type of livestock of different sizes, breeds, quality, background over the entire couple weeks of the stock show.
That's what the National Western's about. It's all-encompassing. It's a place to learn about animals. It's a place to learn about food and growth and future and history.
I would say that the National Western is a gathering in January to socialize, to get together, to have fun, but also to learn and become better educated.
Little kids come to the stock show and they go down into the show pens and they see those cattle get dusted and vacuumed and brushed and pampered, and they get a sense of what the food chain is really like, not just in a package at the grocery store.
For years, it was just a generic deal. You know, you went down to the supermarket and bought a lump of hamburger, and it was just buy-sell process. Now the world has become deeply interested and involved in their food and how it was raised and where it came from, so that bleeds over into events like the National Western Stock Show.
It's going to be important that we educate our children through things like the National Western Stock Show on how this entire region came together. You know, it was formed from agriculture. This state still has agriculture as one of its leading economic drivers.
The stock show in the old days, when we had packing plants and much more facilities to take cattle in, I mean, this was where cattle were bought and sold.
Stock show had a very colorful beginning and colorful history, and of course in those days Denver was a cow town. The seminal event of the 1800s was, of course, extending the railroad into the western United States. And, of course, the main thing the railroads quickly discovered in order to operate profitably is they had to haul cattle and livestock.
Because of Denver's location at the crux of the mountains and the plains, it was a very important transportation hub for the ranching industry.
To reach the West Coast, they had to have some place in between on the rail lines to bring cattle. You know, they'd all die before you'd get to the West Coast, so they selected Denver.
Railroad companies by 1870 were racing to be the first into Denver. And so stockyards began to grow up right outside of downtown Denver.
In order to have a stockyards and have trading and activity to market cattle, they had to have office space for the cattle traders and the packer buyers and the bankers and the other people involved. So they decided to build an exchange building.
So in 1898, the Denver Union Stockyard Exchange Building was built. There was more of a need to build permanent buildings to house the different enterprises that made their living off of the cattle industry.
It was a major livestock market, what they called the central market. And they were thriving, business was good.
So you can imagine this hub of activity and the myriad of rail lines and all the cattle and the cowboys and the noise and the excitement. And that excitement got carried on because it was thought, well, if we're having all of this livestock exchange, maybe we should do something that adds a little more entertainment and some competition. So they had the first livestock show.
In 1898, the Stock Growers Association organized a stock show and a grand public barbecue. They planned to feed between 20 and 30,000 Denverites, and Zhang's Brewing Company came and gave away free beer, and the barbecue was completely overrun.
People kind of got a little carried away with the booze, and then most of them ended up in jail.
Such a riot ensued, such a huge crowd that then I didn't hold the stock show for a couple of years after that, not knowing for sure what to do.
It really didn't get going officially until 1906. A lot of it was down in the front of the exchange building. Where we are now, there were tents.
There were no show buildings, there were no stadiums built yet. And so the organizers borrowed a circus tent from the Sells Flotto Circus and erected it on the site of the stock show today. And at that time, the admission was free. Anybody could come down, they could go through the grounds, they could watch the judging, they could inspect the cattle for themselves. And by making it open to the public, the cattle raisers really democratized this idea of this event, this stock show, really belongs to all of us.
Harry Petrie, give him credit, the first general manager. He apparently had the management skills that it takes to organize and delegate authority to others. A real business civic leader, had great interest in the livestock industry. And because of his ambition and his desire, why, he gave a lot of time and input in establishing the show and got the show off to a great start. And one of the greatest things that was added was the old stadium.
So in 1909, the organizers built the first permanent stock show venue, the Stadium Arena, which is still standing today so that people could come in, get out of that harsh January weather and enjoy the stock show.
It was kind of a vacation in the wintertime to get away from the ranch, the farm, before the spring work started. And it was a big celebration, and they all went downtown and stayed at different hotels. And because of that, why, it became a very elegant show. Many society people attending.
They would dress in their finest garb, and they would bring their fanciest horses, and they would come to socialize. It was a big, 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 big deal.
People came from all over the country. It's a national Western stock show, so they arrived via railroad. And when they came here, they stepped out into the muddy, filthy, dirty stockyards, and I can't imagine what it was doing to the hems of those fine dresses, but they had a ball because this was the event to be at. This was the place to see and be seen in Denver society. The 30s were a really dark time for agriculture and for America in general. And as a result of that, the stock show really struggled because of the Dust Bowl-like conditions. Stock raising was virtually impossible on the plains. It actually profited farmers more just to slaughter their livestock than pay for the feed to raise them.
Those days of the Dust Bowl, the Depression, were horrible years, but the show continued on. When they added rodeo in 1931, they added to the entertainment value of the show, so that did bring people here. And even though times were tough, they didn't have much money, they made means to bring themselves to Denver and enjoy the show.
It still represented that beacon of hope, that light of, this is still the best of who we are. This is the place where if you overcome the hardship, if you struggle and succeed, you can bring the fruit of that here to the stock show and show that off, and you might actually make some money off of it.
I can remember back to about 1941, and I remember seeing all the military equipment, and I can still hear the great voice of Cy Talion saying, "We don't have quite as much of a military display this year, because our men in a foreign land fighting for our freedom.
There was a heavy emphasis on patriotism and on sacrifice for the common good. And proceeds for the sale of the champion cattle were given to support the war effort. In World War I, they supported the Red Cross. In World War II, the proceeds were used to invest in war bonds and show the nation that the cattlemen were doing their part to support the country in a time of crisis.
Coming back from World War II, there were so many new options in construction and in engineering. The Coliseum building, built in 1952, it really embodies that spirit of the post-World War II building boom.
In the late 1940s and 1950s, the city of Denver began to acquire some energetic new young leaders. And leaders like Quig Newton really were looking to the future and trying to create a new, modern, vibrant city. I think the Denver Coliseum really represents their forward thinking and their new ideals. Cast out of concrete, it's relentlessly modern.
This big bowed ceiling was constructed at the Coliseum. People were bold to build things, to move the stock show into a bigger building. It really speaks to everyone's confidence in the future of the stock show.
I have a fond memory of Willard Sims. For a number of years, he was the editor of the Record Stockman, a very popular weekly publication, Livestock News.
My grandfather, H.E. Green, hired him as a reporter, rising up to becoming general manager of the Record Stockman. And then in 1955, John T. Kane, who was the general manager of the National Western, suddenly died.
John T. Kane III, he was a tremendous man and so loved and did so much for the children and the youth shows of that day, and so Willard was a logical one to take his place, and he did a really good job.
Then you have business leaders like Nick Petrie, who was chairman of the board and president here for years, who donated his business expertise and time and money to the stock show and the building of grounds and facilities and the acquisition of land.
In my first year, they bought another 10 acres to the north, thanks to the leadership of Nick Petrie at that time. And I think he really brought the show a long ways.
First year I came in 1967, the stock show, what really impressed me were the yards. I don't know how many cattle there were, but I remember walking out and then going up on that overpass walkway. It was like a sea of cattle in pens. I had never seen that many cows in one spot.
There's a lot of cattle that come in. Angus are the dominant breed in America. Probably the second largest breed is the Hereford breed, and then you have Longhorns, which of course are the native cattle to the western United States and Mexico. Limousine breed, which are cattle imported from France. A Gelbvieh breed, which are cattle imported from Austria. The South Devon breed, which are cattle that come from England. Scottish Highlands, which are big long-haired cattle. Charolais are a huge breed, of course imported from France, and what Big Mac was.
In the 1970s, there was a terrible scandal. Big Mac, a grand champion steer who won the championship, but later turned out was being passed off as an entirely different breed of cattle than he actually was.
Charolais cattle are white. They had dyed Charolais steer black. They knew that a purebred Charolais steer was not going to win, and particularly in those days, Charolais were just newly imported into America, so there was no chance they were going to select a Charolais steer as a grand champion steer. And it probably took cases of shoe dye to ever get a 1,000-pound steer completely black.
This young man from Iowa, he had the grand champion steer that year. He was a so-called Angus steer. Well, my brother Jack knew that this was not an Angus steer, and there was a lot of confrontation about it and blood typing, and it caused an uproar. According to Willard Sims, it was not resolved until March 17th when Big Mac turned white.
In 1988, people and fans were being turned away at the gates of stock show. Denver Fire Department was raising Cain about not complying with code. The papers were in flames over stock show's physical facility decline.
When they needed to add on to the Hall of Education and really do some major rebuilding of the grounds, why Nick Petrie, who was chairman of the board, got Pat to agree to chair the bond drive to pass a bond issue in the city and county of Denver to fund the construction on the grounds.
So we were out here trying to pass this bond issue and get this supported. And that slogan was, "Don't lose the stock show to Texas." And there was a little bit of a jingle, and that jingle worked like a dream. Long and short is we got it supported. We passed with 70% voter approval. People did not want to lose this beloved institution.
With the bond issue in 1989, they gave us the money to expand the Hall of Education and furthermore to build the new event center. Well, then that opened it up with venues that we could use to expand the different type of shows. We started the Mexican Rodeo Extravaganza.
National Western was the first rodeo that developed a Mexican rodeo. National Western was the first rodeo to develop the African American rodeo.
Willard Sims had a study done of the National Western Stock Show compared with some of the major stock shows in Texas, and it was determined that we had to have something that appealed to the urban people again. And so we started a llama show. And at that time, we started kind of a semi-dog show. And I've always had a love of horses, and I have a great enjoyment of music. Combined the two into what was known as an evening of dancing horses.
Dancing horses. That's an evening where you are entertained with the beauty and elegance that they possess, as well as their athleticism.
It was very successful. It was another ticketed performance. It was another way to build our cash flow and build our success. And enormous credit needs to be given to an awful lot of people. One of them was a guy named Swede Johnson at Coors Brewing Company. Swede called me up, said, "Pat," he had a real gruff voice. He said, "I think you guys ought to start an art show down there." Growl, growl.
Pat said, "Well, that's a great idea, but how can we possibly afford that?" And the Swede said, "Well, I will give you $15,000 to launch it, and the project then would be up to you to create it." And then the show started the very next year.
The Coors Western Art Exhibit and Sale started in 1993. The show was really small. It was about 30 artists. The room was 2/3 the size of what it is now.
We gathered upstairs in the Hall of Education, and the poultry show was coming up, and we were actually with the chickens getting ready to be shown. So you used to be able to have a cocktail and shop for art while you walked around and saw the various fowl that were being shown.
It was actually the Coors employees that picked the art. It was the assistant, maybe the line manager, different people. And Harriet Kelly, one of our people that sit on our advisory committee, was there. And she would say, "It was awful. It was really awful."
First year, I think we made $5,000, and by God, from there went up.
Then it became such an exceedingly popular event that it's been moved to the night before, really the true kickoff for the stock show.
It's an art exhibit that's really surrounded by horses and sheep and cattle and cowboys and things that are not thought of as being accoutrement to an art exhibit. But you will see very different thoughts in art and different conversations about art and about the West. And a lot of our artists, by the way, come from ranching backgrounds. So when they know that the funds raised by the Coors Western Art Exhibit and Sale go to the National Western Scholarship Trust, that really makes them feel very proud.
The trust funds around 80 scholarships a year, and the Junior Livestock Auction, Coors Western Art Exhibit, Boots and Business Luncheon, and the Citizen of the West all fund that trust.
Each year, a citizen of the West is named, announced, and a dinner is prepared in his honor. And it encourages all the people of the community to come out and pay homage to that particular individual.
It's gotten to be probably the most prestigious award you can get in town. And it's a very special night that serves a great cause. National Western preserves the heritage of the West by just being here and being the biggest and the Super Bowl of stock shows. Once a year for 16 days, the National Western is the focus.
You think of the parade going down 17th Street, the heart of the financial district, and there they are, that entire cattle drive.
They really lined the streets to see the stock show parade, especially the Longhorns, because they were some of the first cattle in the United States with the big old horns, and they're really a crowd pleaser.
The momentum that it creates before the stock show and after to a certain extent, that goes a long ways towards keeping the character and the values of the stock show out front.
Every year you can go down to the Brown Palace and roped off is the grand champion steer from the National Western Stock Show in the lobby of one of our finest hotels. We're a cow town.
It really creates this stamp of the West during the time the stock show is going on. And the rodeo is one of the top rodeos in the country. In fact, it's been voted the best indoor rodeo in America several times.
When you come to a rodeo, you can expect to see bronc riding, steer wrestling, calf roping, barrel racing, and then you have the illustrious bull riding. But the rodeo has a lot of events that are going on to include everybody.
Families are our biggest attendees at the National Western Stock Show. We've got a petting zoo for the kids. We have Thank a Farmer Magic Show. We've got the National Western Nursery, where people can come into our site and see newborns with their mothers feeding, which is really an educational opportunity. We have the fiddle championships that come up on the weekends.
Fiddle competition? Are you kidding me? I mean, it's just incredible. There's so much going on here, and one of my absolute favorite events to watch is the dog time trials.
They have stock dogs that herd sheep and herd cattle, but you also have a junior hog show.
Just so many things for kids. The mutton busting is one of the favorites.
The child climbs on the sheep and they hold on to the wool, and whoever rides it the farthest is the winner.
There's 50 events a day that the National Western Stock Show currently hosts. We have a trade show that has 800 plus booth spaces.
There's something for everyone, and they say it's the largest trade show in Colorado. When you get 600,000 people coming through the gate, they're doing something right, I guess.
In the 2015 show, 680,000 people plus came across this site in 16 days. And that is huge.
The stock show is a big financial driver to Colorado and certainly to Denver. And it's not just the tickets purchased, there's also the trade associated with it.
Billions of dollars change hands through the transaction of sales over the cattle. It's essential to our economy.
Economic impact is right around $115 million a year for the entire National Western complex, with really buildings that need a great deal of work that are really no longer competitive. It shows you what the future can be with taking today's economic impact and at least doubling it in a new National Western Center. The planning for the new National Western Center really started back in the early 2000s.
The first thing we did was come up with a vision. Basically, it's to be the best we can and do the most we can in education, agriculture, including involving the community around us. And we made a map out of it and came up with a master development plan.
Colorado State University and the city and county of Denver. And History Colorado and the Denver Museum of Nature and Science has come forth and said, we've got programming visions for what this can become with a 365-day agricultural education facility rather than just 16 days of the National Western Stock Show.
It is not just the National Western Stock Show, it will be the National Western Center, where there is education at the highest level about all things that will help people with plants, with animals. It's going to be a focal point, and it's huge.
It will be an absolute marvel.
Much of the complex would be built by 2020.
In 2020, what I'm most excited about is the stock show is going to feel so much the same because it's going to be respectful of its Western heritage.
The new plan does envision keeping the stadium arena, which is the original National Amphitheater, and the Exchange Building and the Yards will be the two historical cornerstones that are left.
They're going to be a pinnacle piece of this new master plan that will continue the life of the stock show for the next 100 years.
The real legacy is that the National Western is the last major thing that reaches back into Colorado's agricultural history.
Do we live in the past or do we live in the future, or can we live in both at the same time? And the stock show is both. It helps us remember who we were, and it helps us remember who we are. It keeps us well grounded to our agricultural roots.
The culture, the Western story, you can hear the echoes of the past. You can smell it. You can see the rolling landscape down to the river, and it allows you to have more of a personal connection. You can feel that your heart is here.
It helps us think about the future and about sustainability and about how we use the environment and how we want to create a better future for our kids by exposing them to the traditions of the past. In 100 years from now, we're still going to have a cattle industry. And as long as we keep building on what we have, I think Colorado's going to be better off for it.
We're all working hard on developing that vision going for the next 100 years here to make this complex be something that will be celebrated by everyone across the world.